Hello, welcome to video number 37. I'm Mr. Miller.
And I'm Ms. Les.
Hello, Mrs. Les. Today we're going to talk about CPCTC.
Which stands for corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent.
Gotta know that. So by the end of this video, hopefully when we ask, you can tell us what CPCTC stands for. And hopefully you can say it really fast, at least 20 times. It's kind of hard.
We'll practice.
All right, so here we go with our first slide here. What else is congruent? Okay, well, our first step is we're going to show that using a shortcut that these two triangles are congruent, and then we're going to find out what else is congruent about them. So if we look, these two triangles, they're going to be congruent because of side angle side. They have the matching sides here. They have a matching set of angles here, and they also have these set of sides which are congruent. So these two triangles we know have to be congruent because of side angle side. Now that we know the triangles are congruent, we know all of their matching parts are congruent. And that's the idea behind CPCTC. Corresponding parts are congruent, triangles are congruent. That means that if we know the triangles are congruent, all their corresponding parts have to be equal.
All of the angles.
All right, so we only needed those three things to conclude the triangles are congruent, but now we know everything is. So we know, for instance, that angle F is congruent to angle D. We also know angle A now is congruent to angle S. And then we know one more thing that we didn't know before. We know that AF is congruent to side SD.
Okay, great.
All right. So let's see another example.
All right, so for the second example, again, I have two triangles with some of the parts labeled. So I know, okay, pen right there. Okay, so I know that this side, DS, is congruent to this side, DG. I also know that this side, which is labeled right here, is congruent to this side right there. And the obvious one, the side in the middle that both the triangles share it, using our reflexive property, I know that this side, DO, is congruent to itself. So I know the two triangles are congruent using the side congruence.
Right.
So side, side, side. So if I know they are congruent by using the side congruence postulate, I also know that everything else is congruent. So in this case, we'll have all of the angles congruent. So my first angle, okay. So using, again, CPCTC.
We just gotta keep repeating that.
Yes. I know that angle S is congruent to angle G.
Right.
I also know that angle SDO is congruent to angle GDO. And my third angle right here, this angle congruent to this angle, so SOD must be congruent to angle GOD.
All right, very good. Okay, so once we know that they're congruent, all the corresponding parts have to be congruent. So, again, if you didn't catch it already, corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. That's what CPCTC stands for. All right, so we're going to see now how this is used in proof. So we've got two examples of proof. In this proof, we're given some information about the triangles, and we want to prove that angle W is congruent to angle Z. So this angle right here, we want to show is congruent to that angle right there. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, the strategy is to show that the triangles are congruent, and then if the triangles are congruent, those angles are corresponding parts, and they have to be congruent.
Using CPCTC.
Yeah. So this is adding like one step. So we're going to prove the triangles are congruent like we have been doing, and then there's one more step. We're going to conclude that the two parts we want are congruent also. All right, so here we go. We're given that WO is congruent to ZO. So I'm going to start labeling parts. WO is congruent to ZO. And XO, where are you? XO is right here. It's kind of hard for us to see. That's why we're squinting. And YO is right there. And we also have a pair of vertical angles here. So I've mapped out the proof. It's going to be a side angle side proof. Okay, so we're going to start. We're going to state the givens. WO is congruent to ZO. And I also have that XO, segment XO is congruent to segment YO. So that is given. And I combined them on one line. All right, so I don't know if I need to or not. I was just worried about space, so I combined those. Now we know that angle WOX is congruent to angle ZOY. And that's because vertical angles, I'm going to abbreviate, vertical angles are congruent. Okay?
Sounds good.
And then, now we know enough to conclude that the triangles are congruent. So triangle W0OX, the whole triangle, is congruent to triangle ZOY. And the reason is side angle side. Okay, and finally, we can go for it. Now that we know the triangles are congruent, we can conclude that angle W is congruent to angle Z. You ready for it?
CPCTC.
You got it. CPCTC, I had to think about it. Okay, let's see if we can get through one more example here. This is the last?
Okay, so for the last example, so again, I have two triangles and I have some given information. So let's start with the easiest part ever, listing the given information. So I have M is the midpoint. Okay, let's abbreviate. And this is given. Okay. My second piece of given information are the angles. So I know angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. So let me label that. Here is my angle 1. Here is my angle 2. And also angle 3 is congruent to angle 4. So angle 3 congruent to angle 4. And now from that first piece of information that M is the midpoint, by the definition of midpoint, I know midpoint splits this segment into two congruent segments. So I know AM is congruent to BM.
It's all coming together now.
By definite, so this was given.
Right.
Just a step back, and this is definition of midpoint. Okay, so I have three pieces. I have angle, side, angle. So I know that the triangles are congruent using the angle, side, angle. So let's write that down. Triangle AMC is congruent to triangle BMD. And this is by using the angle, side, angle congruence.
Here it comes.
And now if I know that the triangles are congruent, I know all of the parts are congruent. So I can say that segment AC is congruent to segment BD using
CPCTC.
CPCTC. Excellent.
Got it. We can do this. All right. It's time for the journal assignment. So here we provided all the reasons. So look at the givens carefully. Follow the steps and provide reasons for each step. You better bet one of them is CPCTC. All right. Good luck.
Good luck.